Well, those of you who are here this morning, welcome back. Those of you who are joining us this afternoon, welcome. Full room this morning and this afternoon. We create some logistical challenges trying to find seats and get settled, but wonderful to see. So this is our student panel. We had our inaugural one last year. My wonderful colleague here, Chris Holman, devised it and ran it beautifully. And I imagine it's going to be just as excellent this year. And it was a nice addition to this conference. It's the fourth year we've had it here. And this is our second student panel. And I've spoken enough today. I'm going to hand it off to you, Chris.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming. This is an amazing turnout. It's really an honor to myself and both the students. Thank you to the students for participating. I mean, we wouldn't have a student panel, obviously, without students. So I just want to get those two thank yous out of the way first. I wanted to take, you want to take it on? Okay. I wanted to take just a minute to explain sort of how this panel came together last year, to give you some context. I've been on the board, I'm not sure, 3 years, 4 years, been on the board for a while. And Edna, at the end, Edna and I were on my study abroad, which you all should come on next year. My study abroad to the first study abroad too, right? There was a lot of firsts that year. My first study abroad to Berlin and Krakow, Poland, about the Holocaust and human rights. That was the theme of the study abroad. And this plane got canceled, and I had already planned to stay the extra night. So we ended up hanging out that night, and we were having a conversation about just what it's like to be a child of survivors of a genocide. And then I had said, it would be so cool to be able to talk to other students my age or other people my age who share these similar experiences, even if they're not from Bosnia in this case. And it just sort of that struck with me. We've had classes, and so I thought, hey, I know a lot of students from different places, and let's see if we can put a panel together. And we did, and I guess it was good enough that the board wanted us to do it again. So here we are. So again, thank you all. How it's gonna go is I'm gonna have the students each introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their background, their heritage, and then a little bit of the history of their either genocide or non-violence that their families have experienced, in case you're not familiar, because we have a nice range of probably. And then I will ask some initial questions, and then the audience is free to ask questions, and they might ask each other some questions. So please don't be shy. Please feel free to ask questions. And the panelists are obviously, you're free to say that, oh, I'm not that comfortable answering that, because I think that's an important thing to just get out there to you. So thank you very much for your attention and for coming, and I'll hand it off to Gisela.
Okay. Thank you so much for the intro.
Oh.
So thank you, Dr. Holman, for the introduction. And I definitely speak for all of us, and I say thanks for the opportunity to be here and to speak. Sorry, I'm just coming over like a little bit of a cold from the weekend, so apologies for my voice. So my name is Gisela Abraham. I'm fully ethnically Assyrian. That's not Syrian, it's Assyrian. So anyone who doesn't know what that means, the Assyrians come from an ancient lineage. So when you hear about Mesopotamia in your world history classes, they're talking about the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, Akkadians. That encompasses us, who we are today. We've maintained, our language, our heritage for so long, despite not having a country. The Assyrian Empire fell back in 600 BC. So it's been a very long time of us still going and still maintaining who we are. And a lot of that is oral tradition, hearing what our parents and grandparents have to say about who we are. So just a bit more about me. My father is Assyrian from Syria. He was born in El-Heseke, and he came to the US for his for university. Then my mom was born in Iraq, and she came at a younger age. Her family initially lived in a few different cities in Iraq, moved to Lebanon, and then in the 70s, the later 70s, the Lebanese civil war broke out. And so they had to leave, and they eventually came to the US. So our family comes from a few different places. A lot of Assyrian families come from the same tribes, but mine is a bit more all over the place. So I've heard a lot of different accents when my family speaks Assyrian. And I know Dylan knows so much more about the different tribes of the Assyrians, so I'll definitely let him talk a bit more about that. And I was born here in the US. I was exposed to the hardships of our people probably around the age of like 11, 12 years old. That was the first time that my dad took me to a Genocide Remembrance event for SAFO specifically, as well as the Armenian Genocide, as that also affected a lot of the Assyrians in the Middle East. So I grew up very close to our church. Our churches are pretty much a center for all of our communities. You know, if there's an Assyrian community that you know of, there is probably a church that's housing a lot of them or most of them. And so I was raised speaking the language, definitely not perfectly, not fluently, but I do try my best. And I've always been pretty involved in our Sunday school, teaching the Assyrian language and learning it. And my senior year of high school, I also worked a bit with the SAFO Center, the Assyrian Genocide Research Center, just to learn a bit more, read a bit more about the Assyrian Genocide. And I shared that in an honors thesis with my graduating class. So that was all a really great opportunity. And now I'm the president of the Assyrian Student Association here at ASU. So definitely very proud of who I am and proud to be involved and proud to bring my people together as best I can.
Sounds beautifully said, Giselle.
Thank you.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth. I currently serve as the Public Relations Manager for the Assyrian Student Association here at Arizona State. I am also 100% Assyrian. My parents also come from the Middle East. My dad is from Beirut, Lebanon. He moved to America when he was 3 years old. And my mom was born in Al-Hassan, Syria. She moved here when she was about 20. We're also, I would say we're indigenous modern Mesopotamians, like to this day. A lot of my family members have experienced some sort of genocide especially my grandma, and we'll get to the stories later on. But my village, I am a Muslim Holman. So in other words, we have different villages. And again, Dylan will get to that as well, because he knows a little bit more about that.
He knows the most.
But he does know the most. But yeah, that's just some of that about me.
My name is Dylan Pathio. I'm only half Assyrian. My dad comes from country of Iraq. He came to America in the 80s in an attempt to flee military service during the Iraq-Iran war. That is one of the things that relates to not necessarily genocide, but the repercussions of genocide. Because my family, and theirs as well, originally come from what is now modern-day Turkey. Though the concepts of the modern countries of Turkey, Iraq, Syria, at least with the modern borders, didn't exist at that time. So during the genocide, during the First World War, when our families were forced to move south into Iraq and Syria, the repercussions of that movement continued on for hundreds of years, including forced military service in countries that didn't exist, even when my grandparents or great-grandparents were born. So when my dad came here in the 80s, he was seeking a better life. And I came along, and now I'm here at Arizona State University and be able to talk more about the experiences.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Edna. I come from Bosnia. My mom, my dad, and I moved out here when I was about 8 years old, kind of due to economic recession after the war that broke out. Most of you might be aware that there was the breakup of Yugoslavia in the 90s. What resulted as a part of that was a genocide on behalf of Serbia and Croatia to try to eliminate all Muslim people. So pretty much everyone in my family is a survivor, if they survived. So I speak just mostly to my parents and my aunts and uncles and whoever I have left. And yeah, I've basically compiled like a mental list of stories to try and like make sense of what was going on during that time. I'm a master's student here at ASU, and pretty much from the get-go, I've had a passion for genocide. Obviously, I took Holman's class, and went on the study abroad and saw Auschwitz and all of that. So I've been diving into more of my familial history and just kind of trying to dig up my family stories.
Hello, my name is Anissa. I'm currently a senior here at ASU. So my family is from the Nuba Mountains in Sudan. We're an indigenous to the land. So following like European British rule, power was basically transferred to like the Arab majority in the country, which led to like a lot of isolation from like governmental resources, as well as because of religious differences. So a majority of the people in Sudan are Muslim. So my people traditionally follow either Christianity or there's like spiritual, just regular African spiritual beliefs. So just yeah, the difference in ethnicity as well as religion just caused them to like want to wipe everybody out. So yeah, so my family came here by way of Cairo, Egypt. And then in 1999, my parents moved here with my 2 older siblings. And then later on, I was born here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, part of what I was wanting to also make this panel is not just for you all to speak to each other, obviously, but also for you to share what it's like to be a college student and be a second or third generation descendant. So I guess what I would ask all of you is, what sort of strengths or skills has your unique experience as descendants of genocidal survivors? What sort of unique skills do you think, or strengths that experience has sort of contributed to you, or your sort of, not just your college experience, but sort of your development as your own person? Anybody can, this is like a free for all now.
I could,
Please.
okay. I could say it's definitely made me more curious about my culture, but also learning about other people's history as well. During my curiosity stage, when I first found out like what actually being Assyrian meant and like who we were, when I actually, dove deep into that, like who we are, where people have been through, I started teaching myself the language. I started attending classes on like Assyrian language, taking classes every Tuesday to protect our endangered language. So it's definitely made me more curious. I served on the Assyrian Student Association of Arizona as well, or the marketing committee, and I've just been very involved in it's became more of a curiosity thing for me. So I feel like that's helped me develop more.
I'll jump in. So I think number one is like, especially as a college student, resilience, like just knowing that a lot of people in my family weren't able to have an education as a result of the genocide has just made me want to like take this opportunity and like really dive in and like, use all my resources, be in school, just because like even like my aunt, she was never able to go to school, so she doesn't really know how to read or write. So just the fact that I have the opportunity just strengthens me.
I love that you said that, because one of the first words I thought of was also like resilience and perseverance. Like I mentioned, the Assyrian people have persevered over so many challenges and hardships. So the fact that like I can see where I come from definitely applies to me being in college. It makes me want to make my parents proud, make my grandparents proud, and do what they came to America for, basically, like to give me the opportunity to get an education and grow as an individual.
So I think for me, when it comes to the skills or the things that I learned and took from it was just like literally everyone else has said, it's wanting to preserve the heritage, keep it going on. One of those little things is I love history, and I love studying the history of my people, especially in modern times with the genocide and 20th century persecution, and the ability to relate stories from people. I love talking to older people, grandparents, aunts, uncles, not just my own, and taking those stories and comparing it to the history, because there's a written history and then there's that oral history. And it's amazing how you find that there's people who may deny or say, oh, it didn't happen like that. But the oral histories always have a way of matching with the written history, the photographed history, the spoken history from historians and journalists and all of those people. The stories always find a way to match with each other, going all the way back. I'm thinking of the genocide itself. I have a lot of stories from my grandparents from the Assyrian genocide during the First World War. And then in the 30s, a period of persecution, in the 50s and 60s, all of the stories always match with the written record. So being able to do that has been impactful because it shows that persecution persists in the minds of people. And that's definitely stuck with me and impacted me.
I think along with what everyone said, in my opinion, it's like it takes a lot of critical thinking to think about these heavy topics, consider them, give them weight, and obviously empathize with them, especially since these are our families and our family stories and like these shape who we are. And when you start taking justice studies courses or sociological courses or anything like that, I feel like you already have the skill set to critically analyze structures and to critically analyze like power discrepancies and kind of like what that can kind of create in the real world.
Excellent. I was curious, when you're talking about families, did all of your family, like, at what point sort of your family, and you, also for the record, not all of you have to answer every single question, so please don't feel like the pressure for that. But you had mentioned, Giselle, that you like were around 11 when your family shared your history, your heritage with you. And I'm wondering, is it like, was there a certain moment when your family started sharing their history, or was that sort of expected at a certain, was it like an age-bound thing, or did it come up in conversation? I mean, I'm just curious, like how sort of you learn more about your families and kind of how that happened, because.
Yeah. So for me, I think it really was just something that came up. So the 7th of August is the Assyrian Genocide Remembrance Day. And so that was the event that my dad had taken me to. And I had always heard, little things here and there, but I never really had a complete story. I just kind of had pieces of a puzzle. But I think that event really did just like stick out for me because it was all of these pieces coming together in my mind, despite being very young. And then when it comes to those like family stories, I love that you brought that up because so a couple of years ago when my maternal grandmother had passed away, I had my great uncles from Chicago in Arizona for her funeral and everything, and we're looking through all her old things and her VCR tapes. So that was something that came up, was their life in Iraq. And one of those things that came up that really struck me was one of these tapes. They had filmed a party, and this was in my mother's childhood home in Chicago. And I was asking, like, that timestamp doesn't look like anybody's birthday or, holidays that I can remember at least. And my mom tells me, no, that's when we found out that my Uncle Yusuf was alive. And I go, what do you mean? Like, you thought he was dead? So he was called to fight in the Iraq-Iran war. And they had heard a year prior to this video on the radio when they were listing casualties, they heard his name from the same city. It was just another person from the exact same place. And for a whole year, they thought that my great uncle had passed in the war. And he was in this war the entire time. It was like an 8-year, 9-year war. And he was a hostage or a prisoner of war. So when they had found out, they threw this whole party. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I need to start asking these questions. Like I don't know anything. So that was just one of those moments that it dawned on me, like I need to ask because it's not going to come up. These are difficult conversations to have. And especially as our grandparents get older, they're going to forget things slowly. So it's really, really important to take that initiative and just ask.
I was gonna say, it started for me when I was in elementary school. Similar to Giselle, I was like about 11, 12 years old. And we were like designing these flags, just like based on our culture. And I was designing it and somebody was just like, what flag is that? And I was like, oh, it's an Assyrian flag. And they're like, what's that? And they go on to ask the question like, you don't have a country, and just kind of questioning who I was. And it was difficult to have those conversations because as a kid, I didn't really know much about who I was. So I went home, asked my mom, and she just took out a bunch of books and started teaching me everything that I needed to know about who who the Syrians are, who stand for what we've been through. And that's kind of just where my curiosity started as well.
I found out a little bit, like Giselle said, it's like finding puzzle pieces. My dad carried around a Swiss Army ID with him, and I was very confused as to why he had a Swiss Army ID if he was not serving at all. Basically, the Swiss Army had come in to essentially take name of everyone in the concentration camp to ensure that they were still alive by the time that they made the next round. So my dad was part of that camp and he had that ID with him. Later on, I want to say like a year later, there was a photo, like a Holocaust photo of like a concentration camp where you see a whole bunch of men up against a fence. And my dad was in the corner. And so I started asking questions, and obviously that kind of got shut down because I was still a kid. But I kept diving into more and more research, and obviously the women in my family have been more open about kind of the tools of genocide and kind of what happened. Every single one of my family members has a different experience. So they just kind of started to share a little bit by bit, and I pieced it together.
For me, the very first time was when I was 4. My parents were planning on taking us back home, and specifically to Nuba Mountain region. But as they were planning the trip, it came to a point where they were like, actually, never mind, it's not safe for us to go, because they were still actively dropping bombs on that region. So I was like, oh, like, I think that was like the first time I was like really real, like, oh, that makes sense why we live here and not there. But then I think more specifically would be when I was 11, when my uncle took me to a protest at Parliament Square in London. And I was like, oh, this is like really serious. Like, and the fact that it was still ongoing, I think that just kind of like made me want to start asking questions and thinking about it more often.
So your folks are pretty forthcoming once you were sort of asking questions. I know the women in your family were a little more forthcoming than men in your family. How about, were your folks forthcoming about it? Anita, or did you sort of, it sounds like it, like sort of a lot of the information, I mean, interrupt you, but it comes from like that you all started asking and then your folks sort of had to respond to those questions. So I know that could be different for everybody.
Yeah, I think especially for my parents, like it was just like kind of like a general thing, like, oh, it's not safe to live there. But as far as like explaining in detail, I kind of had to ask. Because like up until I started asking questions, they would just like drop like traumatizing stories, like as like oh, this one time, like, you know, me and your grandfather were like, you know, chilling at home and like there was bombs outside and he was like, and it's just like, oh, okay.
Very casual way.
Yeah, but not like like this is like, because we don't really have like a Remembrance Day or anything. So it wasn't like, you know, specifically like, oh, like today's a very important day because, so it's just like very casual, I think.
I think also very similar story. Like, I feel like, I mean, especially my grandmother, she's so like, it was so normal. She would tell me these stories and she'd be like, oh yeah, like there's a certain woman, she was pregnant and they killed the baby and the woman. And it was just like stories like that. I'm just like, wait, what? It was just insane. So very similar reality. So yeah, it's really, I think they're just like desensitized to it and explaining it to us because we haven't like lived through that experience. It's hard for them, but they're just so desensitized to it. So it just comes out so naturally.
They say like you didn't know?
Yeah, I don't like,
No.
No, we did not.
It's like an ask what you're having for lunch today kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anybody want to share on those parts? I'm curious, I'm not even off my list. Have any of you started documenting your family's histories in any sort of way? I mean, I'm sure like maybe you have some family documentation already, but I was just curious if that's like a desire for any of you or if that's like a goal or not necessarily, or. Yeah, please.
I definitely have. Definitely started because it's my thing. It's something that I really enjoy, and this stuff needs to be documented before it goes away. Because just as an example, my grandfather was very knowledgeable about things. and he passed away when I was 8 years old. And I'll still ask my grandmother things, and she'll be like, "Your grandfather would know." I'll be like, "Well, that's helpful." So it's very important that we document these things and keep them down. So I've definitely started doing that. My family trees, lineages, including people who died in the genocide, because like my dad doesn't know because he didn't ask, and that's fine. Topics that didn't come up. But now that I asked, my grandmother, who has a very sharp memory, remembers her parents talking about the people and the experiences she had about uncles and aunts and stuff like that. So building a family tree that includes those people. Like in the genocide, my great-grandfather had a brother who was married and had 3 daughters. They were all killed by a band of Kurds who were attempting to steal their money and stuff when they were fleeing from the region which they inhabited in southeastern Turkey. So, and these people, we didn't even know they existed. Like my dad didn't know, I didn't know, but it's just somewhere in the back of grandma's memory that these people were talked about. So just getting all of that down. And again, it comes back to showing that the historical record matches the anecdotal and spoken record as well. So that's my take.
I think for me, we have a list of people who went missing during the war, whether that's our immediate family or maybe someone extended, like a cousin or something. We have a list of all of those people, and I've kind of kept that list with me. We've casually driven by the camp that my dad was in, and he will casually mention it, just like my peers have mentioned, like it's asking what's for lunch or something. So I know where the spot is, and I feel an immense urge to kind of document like what that building looks like and like what kind of things happened in there. But also like it's not a commemoration site like Auschwitz is. So it's just an abandoned building. But keeping those things in mind and that location in mind and those names in mind, I feel is most important going forward.
Have any of you been back to your parents' land, homes of origin?
I went to Syria at a very, very young age. So I don't remember it at all. I was under 5 years old. And I also at 15, 16 years old went to Lebanon. So I did see some like extended family. But yeah, I've never been to Iraq, but I would definitely love to go.
I have never been either, but I definitely plan on going. Luckily, we have programs like Distru. So they're on extra trip right now for Assyrian New Year. And so I'm proud that we like have programs like that. So that's something I want to do in the future.
I have not been back.
Okay, I'm just curious.
I've been to Sudan, but to like meet my grandparents and stuff, but I haven't been to specifically where we come from, just because of like the ongoing instability. But
you were able to go back and meet your grandparents?
yeah.
Excellent. How was that?
Well, I was 7, so
Okay.
I feel like I didn't cherish it as much as I would have now, but it was just cool because like especially like a lot of like Americans, like 5th generation Americans, like grew up with their grandparents. So it's kind of like nice to like have that same experience as a lot of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
So
So I asked you all about like the strengths and skills that you bring, or that, the sort of having these heritages gifted you in a way. What challenges have you sort of faced as a descendant? Or not necessarily that you have, but have you had any challenges, whether it's sort of been with your family structure, in the larger community, or just out in your own worlds? And you may not have.
Since the mic is in front of me, I'll jump in. Just like all of us have talked about here, but it doesn't really, we talk about it like it's a joke, but in a way it's not. Desensitization.
Yeah.
Like they talk about these things like we're going to the grocery store or something like that, or ordering lunch.
Yeah.
And it definitely comes up in other aspects of life, and you don't really notice it until you like kind of pay attention. And you're like, I see how that that impacted people. And, you know, I think it's a common human experience. Everywhere you go in the world, there's hurt and pain that shows up, but it's very interesting in this particular case, that it really does like desensitize people. They just become used to certain things and then it shows up in everyday life.
I think I've dropped the name, like a genocide or like topics of it, just like casually in conversation. And I think all of my American friends have done a double take, like, hold up, we were talking about something completely unrelated. So I think just like knowing that genocide is a really, really heavy topic and not many American students of our age are as used to that kind of topic as we are, probably don't know much outside of the Holocaust or whatever they've learned kind of in classes here and there. But I think having a familial history and a linkage to it and knowing that it's impacted who you are today and how your parents raised you and like the stories that they've taught you, I feel is a different scope entirely.
For me, I think the number one thing is disconnect.
Yeah.
Especially because the Nubian community in Arizona is so small. Like I'll meet other like Sunni students on campus and they'll be like, oh, like what part are you from? And some of them will be like, oh, I've never heard of that. And it's like, yeah. And it's just like not like I can connect on like one level, like being from the same country, but like it's just so different, like being from like this specific area. Yeah, and just like not growing up around a lot of my like relatives, I think also like contributes to that feeling of disconnect, like not having your grandparents with you. And like even like my cousins, like they're all living in different countries. Like when the immigration like people tell you where to go, like you just go, like you can't be too picky. So like we're all kind of scattered around the world.
I mean, there's like genocide, but there's also like, there's so many like stories which I really feel it's so unfair. My mom would tell me about like how her uncle was held in hostage and like there's stories about how my grandma wasn't allowed to have her name Shamiran, which is an Assyrian name. That wasn't allowed like in their city, Syria, Al-Hasaka, back in the 1950s, I believe. Yes, 1950s, until my mom's time. And then they were able to like name the daughters and sons whatever they want. But
Why did that happen? Can you explain why they weren't allowed to do that?
I'm assuming it was an ethnic religious thing because my mother also told me her uncle Manuel, it's a name from the Bible, that also wasn't allowed. So I think religious, ethnic names just weren't allowed. My mom's village, so government, I don't know, but yeah, that wasn't allowed. So just a lot of stories like that, just.
I think with the desensitization that you all mentioned, also comes survivor's guilt. It's kind of like they do go hand in hand, although they are very different, because when you do really sit with the fact that, wow, like this happened to my family, my people, you can definitely feel, especially us as college students, you can definitely feel like I'm so privileged, like I'm here and I'm not doing the best I can. Like, why am I not doing better? And like those things will definitely float around your mind. So I definitely would say that that's where that desensitization comes from. It's definitely a coping mechanism to kind of just get you through and make sure that you're focused on what we're doing here and now.
Yeah, and I was thinking about the piece about, you know, your parents and sort of, and having that privilege and acknowledging sort of your place here and what you are able to attain and the community that especially you three have in particular, because there's such a large community here. But like, do you feel any extra pressure? I mean, I feel like all college students feel pressure, especially if their folks are paying for their school. Like that's sort of a general feeling for college students, I believe, hands down. But do any of you sort of feel a little bit of an extra pressure to like, to sort of to succeed? Because like you said, sir, a couple of you said originally, like.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that because our community, the Assyrian community is so tight knit, it really can feel like there's a lot of eyes on you. We all, you know, your families know each other's business. Like they know, oh my goodness, this person's getting married to this person's daughter or whatever. It's always like, you know, news travels quickly in our community. It's just a fact. So when there's all those eyes on you, there's a lot of pressure to perform well and succeed and make something of yourself, especially within the Assyrian community. Kind of, you want to come back and serve them, do some sort of career where you can help them out too.
Yeah, and I think that happens because we are so small of a community, so it's kind of expected.
For me especially because like it was so hard for like my the people in my parents' generation to go to school, especially if like they lived in the village instead of like the city. I do feel like that pressure, especially of succeeding, because it's like since I was like really young, I've been like taught like, oh, you gotta go to college and you gotta like, you know, major in something real good so like you can like be successful. And even just like as I got to college, like asking more questions about like my dad's childhood has really like made me recognize the privilege that I have in being able to go to school, because he faced a lot of like difficulties, and like his sister, she wasn't allowed to go to school, like being a girl, because they had to like prioritize, like, you know, they had to pay school fees, one, and then two, like it's such a far travel and it's not safe. Like, they would like arrest the kids and the boys, especially in school, for being Nubian, and like try to like give them charges of stuff. Like my dad was telling me about, I think when he was in middle school, he got arrested by the military, and they try to like blame him for like, I don't know, being a part of like some rebel group or something. And his like principal had to like vouch for him, like, no, they've been in school every day, like these kids are not like a part of any like army or anything. And then he had to report to like the military barracks every morning before school, which is like kind of crazy for like an 11-year-old, like being like, all right, like, can I go to school today? Like, are you guys gonna arrest me again? So like just like knowing that like there's so much like barriers that a lot of people in my family had to face in education, and like some didn't even get to go to school, it kind of does give me like that survivor's guilt and like that pressure of like, you know, I gotta do this. Like sometimes I don't want to go to class, but I'm like, gotta get up. So definitely feel that.
Excellent. So you, obviously that you said there's a decent, you know, decently sized and very well organized, it sounds like, a Syrian community here in Phoenix. And Anissa, you mentioned that there's a small Nubian community, Sudanese community here. Is that more accurate?
Well, smaller Nubian community, but a larger Sudanese community. Yeah, most people from the Nubian Mountains do live like in the Midwest, so I have like a lot of extended family in the Midwest.
Just wondering how easy it was for you to connect with other people within your community.
I feel like because we're all like refugees, it's like the tribal stuff doesn't really matter as much. But like when it comes to like thinking about like, you know, my other friends that are like from like the bigger cities and like aren't Nubian, like their experiences back home are a lot different than my experiences. Like there's been a lot of war in the country in general, but like not as much like targeting.
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of like a different experience when it comes to connecting like that.
Yeah.
But I feel like our culture in general does connect us. So it's like a little bit in the middle.
Yeah.
How about you, Edna?
Pretty small Bosnian community, definitely organized around a mosque, like the Assyrians are organized around a church. The diaspora is very different as far as like their takes on the genocide and the war around it. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. Some people do want to talk about it, but not many people are activists or seeking like more information about it, unless they have like a family member that's still missing. So I think finding that topic and like struggling to converse about it has resulted in a little bit of a divide too.
Do any of you have siblings who've had different experiences than you with regard to your heritage? Pretty similar.
I would say pretty similar. My little brother is a whole 7 years younger than I am. So I would say his experience probably differs the most with the language, because as my sister and I have gotten older, English really has become the dominant language in our household, which is unfortunate, but it is a truth. But my dad does, you know, do his very best to make sure my brother is always, practicing his reading and writing. And if in a perfect world, my sister and I would speak Roman and Assyrian as well, but it's just not as natural for us anymore.
How about that with the language? Do you have the rest of you learn your language, your family's language?
It's funny. Dylan would actually teach me because he knows more than I do. So after our Syrian Association events, we just teach language and you just do it for free because he knows the importance of like teaching it and sharing it with fellow Syrians because it's so important. It's not like we can go on Google Translate and like it's not as easy for maybe the French language or Spanish. It's not on there. The resources, for me at least, I find it pretty difficult to find. So that's just something I want to bring up because I was like, I don't think we brought that up, but we are the resources for each other. So that's why we're so close knit and we like to help each other out in that sense with regard to language.
Yeah. Excellent.
I was taught Arabic, but I wasn't taught my tribal language. My dad knows his, but my mom doesn't know hers. And they're from like different like smaller tribes within the region. So they don't speak this, like they didn't grow up with the same language. So we just spoke Arabic in my household.
I think English is like my fourth language, something like that. But I don't speak English with any of my family. I only speak English when I exit the home.
How has that been? Was it difficult growing up?
Very
The
difficult
language?
learning English. When you're not a native English speaker, you have no idea how hard English is to learn. But yeah, it was definitely really difficult growing up. Just trying to like get rid of the accent. That took years. And obviously trying to like make sure that I have the right spelling of like GH, PH, and all the different spellings that English has. That has definitely been a challenge for me when I was a kid, but now I think I recognize the strength in knowing that many languages.
Because language, I think, is such a fascinating thing because, you can, I did my doctoral work in Peru, spiritual tourism in the Amazon, and I was interviewing local people and talking to them about this tourism sort of phenomenon that was coming into Iquitos. And one of the things that he's probably about 25, one of the things the young man had said to me was like that he was very concerned that the language wouldn't get carried on because essentially because you can't commodify language. Like some of the dances, maybe some of the artwork, some of those other sort of quote unquote traditional things, authentic sort of things that you could commodify and sell. Those like they would sort of keep the traditions alive. But he was really concerned that the language is what would get lost with the younger people because one, they had to acclimate and assimilate, and like you did, and two, because you really can't sort of sell that part of your heritage. It's not something that people come to visit you to learn necessarily that, that language, like Quechua or whatever language is in the particular region. So I was just curious if your families had sort of supported you in learning the language or that you have a personal like stake in learning the language and carrying it on.
I could even add just, I would say that that's why there's also a bit of pressure in the Assyrian community, at least, to marry within our culture so that we can pass the language down. I definitely feel that pressure. I don't know if you do, but.
No comment moment. All right, moving right along. Take that as a quiet yes. So we talked about this a little bit. I'd like to kind of maybe circle back to it about your parents and grandparents or family members sharing their experiences with you. If you experienced some sort of hesitation about that from your family members, would you attribute that to more kind of individual characteristics of, say, your one particular grandmother or grandfather or your mom or dad, or as more of sort of a cultural sort of hesitancy? Whether, I don't mean cultural like just broadly, like Assyrians don't want to share. I don't mean it like that, but not wanting, or maybe even a traumatic resistance, to call it something. Did you have any of you sort of have that resistance to talking about it from your from your families or not so much?
The men in my family have not talked about it. They refuse to. A big part of it is because they survived a concentration camp, and it depends on how long they were in there. Some of them were death camps, some of them were labor camps, just like the Holocaust was organized. There are a lot of what scholars are calling like life atrocities that happen there, where it's really, really hard to not even talk about, but just like fathom the kind of things that were happening, because it wasn't just like strategies to kill, it was like having fun in doing so. And so the different kinds of techniques that they employed and the different kinds of games that they would play, I think are really, really traumatizing. And it's a traumatic form of resistance for sure, not only just for them and their like sake of coping, but also to recognize that like me being my dad's child, I can't really tolerate hearing stories about like those kinds of things and that kind of stuff happening to him. I think he is trying to avoid hurting me in that sense. So yeah, that's what I attribute it to.
I think with the Assyrian situation, a lot of the events, it's been long enough that people have been able to process, like with your side, it's very recent. So it takes time for people to process. So like when it came to my grandparents who did experience more than say my dad's generation, they've had a long time to process. My grandmother's gonna be 93 this year. So she's had time to think these things through. And a lot of it's like in the back of the memory, and then it comes up and they'll say it, because I think with her especially, she realizes that it's something that's going to be gone if she doesn't talk about it. So it's time. So I think a lot of this stuff comes with time. Once it's been long enough, more things start to come up. People have processed through it. People are more comfortable with it. Descendants are more mature, maybe. So I think with the Assyrian side, we're more open to talking about it because it has had a lot of time to sit.
The time has healed some wounds. I mean, Anise, I know that clearly it's a very different situation. Can I speak to that at all?
Yeah, I think because it was ongoing, like I've always just like known like, oh, the kids back home like don't have these things, and like but as far as like personal experiences, I've had to like ask, and I think it's just like more of like a not wanting to like think about the negative things. And that could be like a religious thing too, also, like just like the idea of like, you know, like God saved us from that. So like we only have like positive things to look forward to. But I'm not really sure, but
Yeah, no, that's an interesting, really
Yeah.
interesting perspective.
yeah.
In your journey at ASU, you're all still at ASU in one way or the other, who or what has sort of helped you not just sort of succeed in ASU, you're all doing quite well, but also just like in a supportive way? Like, have you found, I mean, I know for a fact, because Fermina's right here, I know that you have found communities and good guidance, you know, and some of you, but I'm wondering if others of you, like, and then you two, like, how did you both come to find your people, and then the rest of you, like, at ASU? Whether it's a group or just other people like supporting you or willing to talk about these things with you.
For me, it's definitely been the Sudanese American Association, which is a student organization here at ASU. We do a lot of like awareness events. Obviously, there's also the ongoing war right now. So like just like having friends that like want to like, you know, talk about these atrocities that are happening and like do something about it, like steer me towards like activism and stuff like that. I think that's been one big support. And also a lot of like my professors here, Professor Ali, she teaches the Arabic department. She's really encouraged me to take classes, so I'm starting to learn how to read and write in Arabic. and she encourages all the Sudanese students to like take Arabic classes because she really just wants us to have like that connection to our language. And she's also the advisor for the club. So yeah, I think that's been one main like thing for me is just having that like student organization.
I think just for me, it's pretty much just professors who have at least a little bit of background knowledge on like what genocide is, whether it's the genocide that happened in Bosnia or not. Having like someone who can like talk about it, think about it, analyze it, has helped me tremendously with like my own thought patterns around like what happened and how to process.
I mean, very similar. The Syrian Student Association, of course, you find the people there, you go to meetings, everyone's there, mainly Assyrian people. But yeah, it's helped a lot. Also, my professors, I've been encouraged to write about the Assyrian people, and I've got a lot of insight from writing those papers. And I think also being here at ASU, because the Assyrian community is big here, Chicago and California, those are like the main hubs. You'll not find an Assyrian in like New York. There's not a big population over there, but because, you know, the Arizona population, we're pretty big, so I'm glad to have sort of an association formed because of that.
Even outside of our Assyrian association and people like Dr. Domina who really help us get involved and encourage us. Even just finding people who want to hear what we have to say and want to learn about who the Assyrian people are and what we've gone through. You know, for me, that's been a religious organization. So there isn't an Assyrian church in Tempe, and since I live here, I felt prompted to seek a Christian organization, and so a lot of people in that organization are American or more Westernized Christians. So the perspectives that they hear from me being a Middle Eastern Christian, they are always so open to hearing it and hearing the history behind it, which is just like, it's just a really great feeling to be heard.
It's fantastic. It's so supportive because it doesn't necessarily mean that would always go that way.
Exactly.
People kind of can dig their heels in their one perspective and not be open to that. That is excellent. How can your professors like better assist you, support, challenge, or inspire you at ASU? Like particularly through your experience, I mean, your heritage, but do you feel supported like when you share your heritage with your professors? Have you felt supported by that? Making sure all the professors out there are listening. They can best support our students.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, with like the essays and papers I wrote, like they would encourage me to write about, we would write about what topics we could possibly write about. He'd be like, I want you to write about your culture because there's not enough information about who you are. And so, yes, they definitely encouraging.
I think especially like supporting student organizations, like the advisors for the organizations. Because like we can't have an organization without a professor advising us. I think that's been a really big thing, just like having professors out there that are willing to support students, even if they may not be like necessarily from the same region. But yeah, just having that, seeing where they can help and asking questions.
Are there other things that you would like to share? Other stories you'd like to share before we open it up to the larger Q&A or? Well, okay. All right. Well, then we have time for questions. Yes, in the back.
All right. So, what do you do when you face people from certain groups who deny the genocides? Like, what do you do when you're faced with such a reaction?
Should I repeat what I've
Yeah,
said?
just go ahead.
Okay. So when you face people from usually specific groups who deny the genocide that you or your parents have experienced or your ancestors, what do you usually do in such a situation?
With me, I like to take a calm approach. So I figure out where they stand. Is this someone I can talk to them about personal experiences, get comfortable with it, whatever, someone I'm trying to get to know better, then it's something that you can talk through. If it's just someone in passing who's being a jerk or whatever, just ignore and move on, because you know what? We live in a free country where there's this ability to talk about what we want to. And if it might be hard, but it's something that it may be better just to move on from so it doesn't start bigger things.
You can't talk to people who don't want to listen.
Absolutely.
So I like what you said. I've never experienced this myself, so I can't speak from a personal experience exactly, but I would definitely agree with your approach. If people don't want to hear, they won't. And at the end of the day, we can only do so much to inform people. Everyone is responsible for their own naivety or ignorance on a certain subject. I always say the internet is free. For us, we're lucky enough to have it, so, people can do their research if they so please.
I was gonna say exactly that.
Have either of you experienced that at all?
I haven't really experienced denial. It's more just that people don't know. So it's just informing people.
Or educating people?
Yeah.
I would say I experienced it a lot when I was a kid growing up. Right now, the political climate back home is all about genocide denialism. It's kind of like a big hot topic, I guess. When I was a kid, the way that other kids were raised was very much deny what happened or make fun of what happened. And I pretty much didn't really pay much attention to it because in my head, it's like, what they're saying won't change or bring people back. So it's best to live with the true history that I know and just ignore what they're trying to say, whether it's political game or just trying to irk me, but yeah, just ignore it and move on.
I think there's a difference between people who have experienced genocide but still have a country of their own, and people who don't. So I want to give you a scenario. So you're among international students, and they all have a kind of sense of national belonging. This is our land. We are on the map, and we are recognized by the international community. And then they ask you, what country are you from? How do you feel? How do you answer that question?
Well, for me, I would say my dad is from Iraq, but quickly follow that up with, but I'm Assyrian, because to Assyrians, that's the more important thing. A lot of Assyrians will find the ability to connect themselves to their country that they come from. In a way, a lot of Assyrians are proud of being from Iraq or from Syria or from Iran. But it still has a thing where it's like, okay, but where on the map? There's no country to point to that's Assyria. There's no place to point to that's Assyria. And that's resulted in a whole slew of other problems that directly comes down from the genocide. For example, 80 to 90% of our population lives in diaspora, which is leading to the possibility of extinction very quickly for us because we don't have a basis back home. So just going off of that, it makes what happened with the genocidal policies in the past even more exacerbated because we don't have a place where we can pinpoint our culture, pinpoint our heritage and say this is home. It's divided up and different people control it and the narrative also, so.
And we're scattered, so it just makes it a lot harder.
But it's an opportunity to inform and share and say, well, we don't have a country today, but this is who we are. We exist in modern day Iraq, Turkey, Syria, Iran. But yeah, I think just kind of having the perspective of being able to share something, even though maybe it doesn't feel that great to say, well, we don't really have a country, but it's an opportunity to inform.
You have a culture, and you are working to keep that culture alive and well with your communities, with the language. I think that is really phenomenal. Excellent. Do you have a question?
I have
The chat.
the chat. So, this is from Kim Blatt. She would like to know, let's see. What would you say to students and young people who are ashamed of their family's history or afraid to be considered different? And then she also just wants you to know that you are all stellar role models. So there you go.
I think I can go first. Surviving a genocide is a really, really big deal. It's not something small. It's not like some crazy accomplishment or something like that. I think it's something that you kind of have to carry and live with. It's something super, super heavy, but to be able to survive it, to speak of the atrocities that happened, and to possibly provide justice for the people who are no longer with us is probably the most important thing. There's really nothing to be ashamed of. It's just history. It's a very, very painful history, and with a lot of justice not being served, but it's really, really important that we carry it forward so that other people who descend us know what happened. So we can't repeat this again.
Yeah, adding on to what Edna was saying, just like the fact that you were able to survive, like you come from a long history of people who survived something so like atrocious, is something to be proud of, and you don't really gain anything from like erasing that. Yeah, because I think especially like for Nubians, a lot of people, if they're Muslim, they'll like adhere more to like the Arab culture, but like you have your own culture to be proud of. And I think that's something very important because you're indigenous to this region. Like that's something that no one can take away from you. And I think it's something that you should be proud of. So just like knowing that you come from a long line of resilient people should be enough for you to want to like be proud of your heritage. Yeah. And keep spreading it, keeping it alive.
Thank you. Great question. Kim, first.
Hi, I'm a genocide studies scholar and an association writer. And one of the topics that I write about in my fiction is, do I have to move it? Fine, thank you. Well, one of the topics I like to tackle in my fiction is very often the idea of diaspora communities and what happens as a result of them trying to navigate the tension between preserving their identity and assimilating in the culture. And I think this came up, and I know we have some reservations about the word assimilation, but let's just use it simply for today. We spoke about language. You spoke about, these tensions. You also spoke about, Anissa, you spoke about being part of communities, a community over here. So I'd like to ask this question to you about endogamy, which is the practice of making sure you marry within the community that you're born. How does this affect you today? And how do you navigate that? Because I think there is a stress sometimes when you're a diaspora community to marry within the community, to preserve that identity, the culture, the language. So how do you navigate that amidst all these different conversations we've had today?
I can start, since I mentioned it a little bit briefly earlier. Doesn't matter which way I say it. Okay. So that's actually a really, really good question. I think a lot of people in our community might disagree with me. But personally, I put my faith over my cultural identity. Those are my top two things, but my faith does come first. So at the end of the day, I am going to seek somebody who shares my religious beliefs. So as a Christian, that would be you believe in Jesus Christ, right? So that's my number one thing. being a Syrian follows that as a very close second. So ideally, I would prefer to marry somebody Assyrian and raise our children close to our community. But like I said, at the end of the day, if it's not someone who's Assyrian, but we share the same faith, so long as that person is open to kind of learning more about my people, as well as bringing our children up near our people and near our language, that's kind of my bottom line.
I agree with that. I think it's also just the unknown. It's like, I feel like every Assyrian wants to marry an Assyrian just
Mhm.
because of like the shared traditions. I feel like that's just how it is with like every culture. But like, I mean, that's the goal, at least for me.
Mhm.
But just the unknown, you never know. But that's the goal. Keep the traditions alive.
It does make it a little easier too. When you meet someone Assyrian, like even in a non-romantic way, you meet new friends and you're Assyrian, you click very, very fast because you have that shared trait. Yeah.
The unknown.
So I thought I'd give some input since I am half. My mom is American. What I've noticed, possibly this take might interest you, is within the Assyrian community, it's not really what percentage of Assyrian you are, it's how much interest you have in the culture. And sometimes that doesn't determine the preservation. So like me as an example, I love my culture, I love my heritage. I speak my language, I read and write my language. I enjoy the stories of my ancestors and everything. And there's some Assyrians who just don't care. They don't care at all. And so it's about what's inside ultimately. But yeah, personally, I probably want to marry an Assyrian just because it does make it easier as a parent to instill that in your children. But yeah, that's my take. So.
What would your mom say to that?
She's glad that that I like my heritage. So, and I'm into that side of my heritage too. So.
And Lisa, do you have that? Any similar?
Yeah, I didn't really have an answer when you guys started answering, but once you said about the religion aspect, because the community of Nubians here, a majority of them are Muslim, and there is that disconnect because I was raised Christian, so there is that disconnect. So I do definitely think that like the connecting over religion probably holds more weight than ethnicity, but I don't know. It is a good question.
Yeah.
I haven't tried to stress myself out about it.
We'll have lots of time.
Yeah, whatever happens.
Excellent. Other questions?
So you guys said that the Assyrian community kind of goes from like Chicago, Arizona, California. Do you know why that is? And then also, did knowing that make you like choose ASU specifically just because of the community and all that?
So the reason for establishment in places like Chicago and also in California, it's a history conversation, but with California, it was primarily the Central Valley due to farming. A lot of people were coming from a region in Iran where they were agriculturalists. So they went there because there was good farming opportunities. In Chicago, it was economic. I mean, a lot of immigrants went to Chicago. And then here in Arizona, some people just started coming in the 90s and it grew from there. People liked it. Maybe it's because of the weather. I don't know. It's similar to Middle Eastern weather in a lot of ways. So that helped. And when it comes to ASU, I wanted to stay here with my family. So definitely, me being here definitely impacted my decision to come here.
I would add that beyond my decision to stay in Arizona, because my family moved from Chicago to Arizona when I was like not even 2 years old yet. So I consider myself an Arizona native despite being born in Chicago. So outside of my decision to stay here for university. When I'm looking at what I'm going to do after graduation and careers, I do want to stay near an Assyrian community. Anyone, I want to look for jobs in California. I want to look for stuff in Chicago. We have a bit of a smaller community in Texas as well, so that's an option for me. But yeah, that's definitely a driving factor is wanting to stay near one of our churches, stay near kind of like-minded Assyrian people who speak the language. It's good to stay surrounded by that. Otherwise, I know I'm not going to use the language and I'm going to lose it. You have to keep using it to maintain it. So that's my take.
Yeah, very similar. I told myself I was only going to go to university where there was an Assyrian community, so definitely a driving factor. Even post-grad, I'm only looking for those things because it means a lot to me. That community means a lot to me, and it's definitely important.
Okay, we have another question online. It's from Tim O'Toole. He says, I am an older grad student who spent most of my life in the military. I witnessed the aftermath and active acts of genocide in a few of the areas that you are all from. I have always been impressed by the people and their resilience after the fact. Do you think it is possible to forgive the person committing the acts? Do you think segregation from one another will ever change? Easy question. Softball.
I don't think segregation needs to be the norm, which is a hot take. But I feel like, especially with the younger generations, we feel a little bit more responsible to maybe instill some peace amongst the older generations. As for people who experience life atrocities and as for people who experienced camps or rape hotels or things along that manner, I don't think it's possible to forgive the perpetrators. You find a lot of peace somehow in knowing that that perpetrator won't go to jail and probably won't face the consequences of what was done, just because in genocide it's not like a eye for an eye thing. I don't think there's forgiveness, but I do think there's hope for a future with a lot of peace and possibly solidarity and just like recognizing that this is something that happened. I know that when we took the study abroad, Germany was like far more expansive in Holocaust education than Poland was, which was really interesting to see. And as long as other countries can kind of follow suit and make sure that we're educating people on what happened, even if like your people are the people who perpetrated this kind of thing, then I think having a future where genocide never happens is possible.
I'll talk. I think for Sudanese people, like I was raised with a lot of like South Sudanese people. And for those of you who don't know, like South Sudan seceded from North Sudan in 2011 because of like those political, ethnic, and religious divisions in the region. But because there's just been instability in the region overall for a really long time, I feel like the diaspora communities, wherever they may be, we're just like drawn to each other on the basis that we were once a united people under colonial rule. So there isn't really segregation, but like as for the people, it's more like of a political thing, like resistance against the government, forming rebel armies, things like that. Yeah, but I don't think the people are like so much into like segregating each other, and it's mostly just like resistance against the government.
Okay, a little short on time. One more question in the back. I don't believe that precedent.
I'll try to be brave in the question. As you were talking about learning about your own individual heritages and histories, it seemed to be a bit of a patchwork in terms of age and stories and who you learned them from. I'm wondering if, as you go forward into your own lives, you have a plan for yourselves, how you will pass this perhaps to your own offspring and extended family members. And does documentation play a role in that? And what age do you think is appropriate to begin learning some of these stories?
Thank you. So I would say that documentation is really important. Just this past weekend, I got on the phone with my mom as well as a couple of her great uncles, and we literally just recorded the call and they let me ask my questions. And part of that recording, I want to just kind of transcribe so it's something we can pass down in writing. So yeah, documentation. And the reason that I find that so important is because when I was speaking to my family this past weekend, I asked about my great-great-grandparents because they were the generation that lived during Sefo, which is the 1915 genocide of the Assyrians. So my mother was telling me that she didn't even know what her grandparents and great-grandparents looked like. They did not have photos, they didn't have detailed records, it was all word of mouth. So I think today I have the resources to document, to ask my great uncles and great aunts questions. And so I would definitely continue that. As for an age when I would teach my children this, honestly, I'm not there quite yet, but I would just kind of try to follow my parents' lead on that because I feel very blessed to be as informed as I am. So I guess I would definitely look to my mom and dad for guidance on that.
Oh, yeah, they
got it. Okay.
Y'all want to like weigh in on this one? Any stuff?
I don't think any age is like too young. I think just like the way that the information is presented should be age appropriate. Yeah, I think because like my parents started like just telling me like, oh, you know, growing up, we didn't have this, we didn't have that, but it wasn't like, I didn't really get the gory details until I was much older. So I don't think it's ever too early.
Well, I'm a little bit sorry if you had questions. I somehow thought we went till 3:30. So if you had questions, maybe you can talk to the panelists if you all are willing to stick around. Maybe I'll find, you can maybe ask them personally. But I just wanted to take a moment to thank Tim, Ari, Yarn, everybody. Yeah, my turn. Well,
And a rounder for them. Thank you for being here and another amazing student panel, and this really enriches the program. So thanks for doing this again, Chris, and for all of you to come and share your story and experience. And relatedly, our next panel is going to be on intergenerational memory and trauma with our own Don Fixico here. And this will start in 15 minutes. So we're going to have a 15-minute break. Reminder again, there's refreshments out there if you need caffeine, you need hydration. And after that, if you need restrooms, they're out there. So we'll see you again in 15 minutes. And let's give one more round of applause for our students.